I live in Rio de Janeiro. My apartment is right next to a dangerous favela. Drug dealers from different gangs are constantly at war in my area. One night, I was sound asleep. I am a deep sleeper, so most things don't wake me up. This particular night, a huge explosion shook me from my slumber. Wide awake in my bed, I was trying to process what I heard. Gunshots were pretty common in my area, but this was no gunshot. I thought maybe this was a grenade. Chills ran down my spine. In Brazil, criminals use weapons that other countries would normally use for war. If this was a gang fight, it was a serious one. I tried to calm down and think logically. First, I slid off my bed and onto the floor. By staying low, I would likely avoid any stray bullets. I began crawling on the floor like a soldier. I crawled into my kitchen, where there were more walls to protect me. As I crawled, gunshots rang out. They sounded so close. Even though I was scared, this situation really didn't surprise me. The news had been filled with gang-related conflicts. I personally once saw a mother dying while protecting her son from gunshots. Another time I saw criminals breaking into houses and taking hostages. I crawled from my kitchen to my front door to lock it. I stayed crouched on the ground, waiting for the sounds to pass. All of a sudden, I noticed something that sent a shiver through my spine. My doorknob started to turn ever so slowly. Whoever was opening my door clearly didn't want to be noticed. I swallowed hard. An eternity seems to pass by. Horrible thoughts passed through my head. Maybe I didn't lock the door all the way? What will happen if he gets in? Luckily, after the knob turned, the door didn't budge. I then heard footsteps retreating away. The gunshots also stopped. After a couple of minutes, I got the courage to tiptoe to the peephole. Looking out, I saw two guys in my corridor. They were wearing regular clothes and didn't seem to have any guns. They were clearly trying to open my neighbor's door. Out of nowhere, one of the guys turned his head towards my door. He shouted, "There's someone in there." The other guy pointed towards my door and said, "Open up, we're undercover police." A pit formed in my stomach. What if they were telling the truth? I wasn't going to take any chances. I yelled, "Is this about the shootouts?" After a while, one of them answered, "Yeah, we just wanted to see if you're okay." I moved my trembling hand toward the lock. I was about to open it. I then yelled, "I'm okay." The guy said, "But we need to come in. We need to teach you how to protect yourself if this happens again." I said, "There's no need to." I ran back to my bedroom and after a while returned to sleep. That following morning, I heard some commotion in my hallway. I saw journalists, people crying, and police in front of my neighbor's unit. Soon after, medics came out with my neighbor on a stretcher all bloody. I shivered and sweat profusely at the sight. Turns out the guys were robbers. They came to a party at my apartment. After the party, they went around trying to rob people. The shootout ended up being unrelated to the robbers. The creepy thing is, if that shootout didn't happen, my door would have been open and they would have come in. I felt bad for my neighbor, but it could have been me on that stretcher. It's here. I don't know where, I don't know how, but it's here. It's inside the house. I've done f***ing everything. I've called Todd, I've called Howard, I even called a goddamn exorcist. None of them believed me. None of them so much as offered to help. Now it's Halloween and it's stronger than ever. I can feel it moving through the house, like a great darkness suffocating the light from everything. It's already taken my business partners, John and Erica. It's already taken so many others. I'm upstairs in my bedroom closet. I've been here for 3 hours now, and I'll be here for 3 more if that's what it takes. I don't know if the thing hates the sun, but it never bothered me during the day. Only at night, always at night. There's a creak and a groan outside, on the steps, and I feel the house tremble as something monstrous moves through it. My breath hitches in my chest, and I remind myself to be still, to be quiet. I just need to make it until sunrise, just a little longer. Then, the voice follows, low, raspy, and inhuman.
So many lies, so many lives, and so little time.
It's singing a song, but the tune is broken. Each word scrapes along my ears like a razor blade, cutting deep into my mind and pulling back memories. It sang before it took John. It was only a single word then.
Coming.
It had hummed, and we had all just thought we were hearing things. Now John's everywhere. There are pieces of him littered throughout the house, fingers and toes, and intestines and eyes. I weep silently into my hands, and I can smell John's blood on them. I can hear his screams. I can taste my cowardice for not doing more to help him, for not even trying.
Oh, how good it'll feel to finally go.
The thing sings. I wince in pain at every word. God damn, it hurts to listen to it. Warmth flows from my ears, and I realize they're bleeding.
Just one more, and then the song ends.
I gasp in agony as more memories tear themselves from my mind. Erica. Her and I had separated in the panic of John's death. I had run up here, trying to call the police, but my phone was haywire. That's when I heard it come for her in the basement. The house creaked and groaned with the creature's every step.
One more will do.
It had sung, descending the basement stairs.
One more makes two.
I only heard her scream for a moment, and then it faded to silence. Until the thing laughed, guttural and monstrous. It echoed throughout the house, shaking the foundations and rattling the old wooden frame. It laughed and it laughed.
All that we need, all that we eat, all hail the coming of All Hallows Eve.
Now it's moving toward me. It's getting closer. I can feel its every step, its every movement. It passes through the house with tremors of violence.
Just one more.
It sings again.
And then the song ends.
It's outside the bedroom now, and my ears are bleeding badly. I can't take it anymore. I can't take the sound. I clamp my eyes shut, trying to ignore the agony of its voice, trying to ignore the panic rioting in my body. The floorboards creak outside the closet, and I smell something rotten, vile, and grotesque. Something dead. There's a low groan as the closet door slides open.
Looky, looky.
It sings, discordant and tuneless.
Wouldn't you like to see something spooky?
I don't look. Agony tears through my eyes. They're being split open from the inside out, and blood is pouring from my head in a river down my jaw. I whimper, and something leans close to me. The smell of rot is nearly unbearable now, and I gag and retch, but I refuse to open my eyes. I can't. If I see it, then it's real. If I see it, then I die. Something grips my wrist, something cold and damp and loose with flesh. It pulls me from the closet, and I howl in terror and fear. It's taking me somewhere. Please, I sputter, please don't. My leg creaks as it drags me down the steps, and I scream. My eyes are clamped shut, but I feel myself moving through pieces of John as the creature pulls me through the house. Finally, it stops. I'm hyperventilating now, my chest rising and falling in rapid succession. No, 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 I mutter again and again.
Yes,
it says, and this time it isn't singing. It tosses me by my arm, and I feel my shoulder snap backwards out of its socket. I tumble down the old wooden stairs, my head smashing against the steps, my wrist snapping in half as I finally collide against the landing. I groan, tears and blood streaming down my face.
Looky, looky.
It sings, though its voice is now guttural and horrible. It grabs me by the back of my hair, pulls my head up, and reaches its fingers down to my eyelids.
Would you like to see something spooky?
It pulls them open, and I see our studio. Our camera is pointing toward the cages, 10 of them, each filled with pieces of the children, each a tapestry. The light in the basement is dim, but I can see Sally's witch hat, still tied to her head. I can see Michael's werewolf paw, still on his dismembered hand. I lick my lips. There, in the back, is Yonda's Cinderella costume, the glass slipper still upon one of her feet. The thing throws me forward, and I crash against the steel bars of the cage. When I look up in a daze, I see Erica's corpse. My dear filmmaker, mutilated and cut into pieces. Her eyes are missing, and her hand is stuffed halfway down her throat. I lean forward and vomit, only then realizing that I'm lying in a pool of her blood.
So many lies, and so little time.
Creature sings. I hear the click of a button being pressed and see a red light hovering in the darkness. The camera is recording.
Looky.
Please, I rasp. The house creaks and groans as it steps forward, and my body scrambles backward on its own accord. Please.
Wouldn't you like to see something spooky?
I don't know his name. I don't know his age. I don't know where he lives, and I certainly don't know how to find him. All that I know is that he's dangerous, and he's on the move. I'm a government employee. I work in a research lab that develops experimental weaponry, primarily of the biological variety. I don't want to say too much more than that, as this is already at massive risk of exposing my identity. But I will say that I'm not exactly an intern. I've seen things. I've studied things. I've created things. I created him, or, better put, I recreated him. Confused? I don't blame you. If you're reading this, then you're well aware of the concept of legends and mythology. Things that feed on our collective imaginations to grow more powerful, that live on our tongues as we utter their names and speak their stories, growing and evolving until they become a force of their own. Unstoppable. Unforgettable. The man with the red notepad is one of them. I'm not positive, but I think his legend began in an email chain from the late 90s. You know the type. Forward this to 20 people in the next hour, or some asshole is going to hack you to pieces with an axe. Except his went a little differently. In his, he would find his victims and draw them. Sometimes he would draw them drowning to death. Other times he would draw them wasting away in a hospital bed. And other times, he would draw them being cut open and pulled apart. It was a coin toss what version of the internet myth you'd encounter, but all of them had one thing in common. He would draw you, and you would die. The thing about the man, though, was that his sketches were thorough. It wasn't enough to simply make a stick figure labeled Sally and have that stick figure being impaled by a flagpole. No, in his sketches, Sally was a detailed work of art, with immaculate shading and perfect lines. His sketches would take hours. Sometimes they would take days. It was only after he had finished his sketches and signed them with his messy initials that the death sentence would trigger. When I received the assignment, I laughed. Give life to a legend? I remember saying to my boss. You know April Fool's was 6 months ago, right? She wasn't laughing, though. I remember the way she took a deep breath, straightened her blouse, and sat down in the chair across from me. I remember the steeple of her fingers, the nervous twitch at the corner of her mouth, and the smell of cheap coffee gently steaming on the table between us. Fear, she said carefully, is a weapon more powerful than bullets and bombs. We need that right now. That was 6 years ago. I've grown since then, mentally and physically. So has the man. He started life in a test tube, shapeless and helpless. Before long, though, he was walking, talking, and after not much longer than that, he was killing. At first it was prisoners, people we'd pulled from black sites. We'd sit both of them in a lab we called the Red Room, the prisoner chained, and the man behind a plexiglass divider. He'd draw them, and they would die. Sometimes they'd catch fire. Other times they'd break out in hives, scratch their own skin bloody, and flay themselves alive. Always, though, they would die. Needless to say, he never had access to the notepad unless the experiments were running. In the time between, he'd sit alone in his small cell, hunched over in the corner with his head down. I suppose I couldn't blame him. With only a thin mattress, a bowl to shit and piss in, and 2 meals a day, there wasn't much else for him to do. We kept 2 cameras pointed at him at the front of the room just in case. monitoring the man at all times. We even made sure to cycle the guards, on the off chance he managed to coax one into becoming sympathetic. Hell, thanks to some clever genetic work on the part of my science team, he rarely even needed showers, so he was virtually always under lock and key. We took steps, is what I'm saying. We covered our bases. Despite it all, though, he escaped. I got the call last week, and when my boss broke the news, at first, I called bullshit. It wasn't possible. Nobody escaped the facility. Hell, I remember the day it had first opened, when I was still a young man with stars and stripes in my eyes, and fantasies of helping my country defeat the bad guys. I remember the contractor who'd overseen the construction, a round and hairy man with breath like garlic sausage and the fingers to match. He'd called the facility state-of-the-art, proudly boasting that Sherlock Holmes couldn't break out of here. And yet the man was gone. Not only was he gone, but he had left a bloodbath in his wake. All in all, there were over 10 security personnel dead. One of the guards was found outside the man's cell, her skull cracked open and brain matter gently oozing from the fracture. Another was found in the camera control room, a bottle of Drano at his side and vomit covering his chest. Another was a personal friend of mine and head of the overnight guard detail, and he was found draped over the woman who ran the front desk, a bullet in both of their brains. It was horrifying and mystifying all at once. How could this have happened? The man's cell was entirely enclosed and didn't allow him to see any of our personnel. The most it had was a tiny slot on the bottom that we passed food through, and he passed his shit and piss through. Each week, when we'd retrieve him for our experiments, we'd even dispatch personnel to scrub the room and ensure he wasn't drawing on any of the surfaces. Of course, we tried consulting the camera footage, but the cameras had been disabled during his escape. There was nothing. He was just gone. A few hours after the escape, I got a call from the IT department. They'd been going back through old footage of the man, trying to determine if there was some hint of what was to come, something that might indicate exactly what had happened. They showed me footage of the man in his cell, and it looked like the same routine I'd seen 1,000 times before. He sat in the far corner with his head down, silently waiting for his next meal or bowel movement. There was the sound of a latch opening, followed by a woman's voice calling the man to supper. And then a covered plate of food slid across the floor. The man shifted, getting up to retrieve the plate. When he did, I saw it. A tapestry of red was written upon his flesh, detailed and intricate, markings covering his stomach that looked to have been carved by the edge of a fingernail. He quickly readjusted his shirt, taking care to tuck it back into his waistband. My jaw dropped in stunned silence. "Can you play back the footage with his shirt up?" I said quietly. "But take a still capture and zoom in." The IT technician nodded and did so. That's when it all came together. The markings in the man's flesh were his escape plan, his sketches, each one an immaculate carving of the facility's guards, each one a piece of the puzzle. One showed a guard unlocking the man's cell, then caving in her own skull with a heavy steel door. Another had a guard disabling the cameras and then swallowing drain cleaner. The last sketch was of the man I knew, the head of the nighttime guard detail. It pictured him shooting and killing 7 other security personnel and then turning his sidearm on himself. There was also another sketch. I recognized that face as well, and my heart sank momentarily before realizing the subject of the sketch was still alive. She was a secretary in our archives, a young woman who had tragically lost her arm in a traffic collision 2 months ago. She hadn't been back to work yet, but it pictured her burning down the archives and all the local research we had of the man before walking into the flames herself. In the man's flesh, though, she still had 2 arms. My mind turned, and I realized how the man had pulled it all off. It was in the time between experiments. It was during the walks we'd take to the Red Room. While he made his way along the corridors in chains, he'd catalog faces, features. He'd store them away in his memory, taking care to notice small details of their schedules. He'd grown up here, after all, spent years in the facility. He had plenty of time to grow familiar. At first, my boss refused to believe it. She argued that he never indicated any such capability in the email chains we'd pulled his legend from, that he'd always needed his red notepad, and once he had it, he needed the subjects present to sketch them. It was, of course, our mistake to forget that legends evolve. Now, that mistake has cost people their lives. I see it in the news reports. They're easy to miss if you don't know what you're looking for. But I know the man is on the move, and he's killing again. The facility and the government refuse to comment on it. They refuse to come clean about the things we're doing and the danger the public is in. My boss died 2 days ago. The day before that, a member of my research team passed away. The day before that, 2 other members died. I'd probably be dead myself if I hadn't seen the writing on the wall and taken one of my fingers off. So now I'm taking matters into my own hands. I'm raising the alarm to you, the public. The man with the red notepad is out there. He may be sketching you. You might not even see him doing it. Maybe he'll just say hello to you in passing. Maybe he'll just take a memory. But if you do catch somebody looking at you a little too carefully or glancing your way before putting pen to paper, then it's time to run. It's time to run and maybe leave a finger behind for good measure. Serial killers worldwide are connected by a hidden website, the dark web. Where do I even begin? Well, it all started for me during my sophomore year at college. I was an introvert and kept to myself. My anxiety was always an issue for me. Weed was the best remedy. It kept me sane. It allowed me to function normally in society. Without it, I don't know how I would operate. Unfortunately, weed was illegal at the time. About once a week, I had to go to this sketchy drug dealer's house to get my supply. His name was Chase. All the homes in his neighborhood either had boarded up windows or bars on them. I usually walked to Chase's house, since it was only 5 minutes from my dorm. One particular day, I walked to his house to pick up an ounce of weed. It was a gloomy winter day. During this particular walk, I felt this ominous feeling in the air, almost as if I knew something bad was going to happen. I passed this rundown house that I always thought was abandoned. To my surprise, someone was staring at me from one of the shattered windows. His appearance was rough. He had dirt all over his face and wore a tattered white beater. I made eye contact with him. He started to smile at me with these crazy eyes. I quickly picked up my pace and started jogging. I knocked on Chase's door, but he didn't answer. His car was in the driveway, and I wasn't taking any chances with the crazy guy outside, so I just helped myself in. After opening the door, I knew something was wrong. All the lights were off, and it was eerily silent. Suddenly, I heard Chase yell, "Hands up!" The lights turned on, and Chase was pointing an AK-47 at me. He said, "Jesus, kid, I almost shot you. You can't just come in like that, especially after..." Angry and frightened, I yelled, "What the hell, man? Especially after what?" He stopped and said, "Oh, it's nothing. Your weed is right here." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a Ziploc bag with the weed inside. Outside of the house, I heard a car accelerating around a corner. The tires were screeching. Chase yelled, "Get down!" I dropped to the floor. Next thing I knew, bullets were flying into the house from the car driving by. Then silence. We stayed on the floor motionless for the next hour. When it felt safe, I called my friend to pick me up and got the hell out of there. The police never even showed up. That's how bad this area was. I promised myself I would never buy drugs in person again, not after that experience. A few weeks went by, and I was itching to buy more weed. My friend suggested I try the dark web. He said it was easy to do, and it would ship right to my dorm. A few online tutorials later, I was buying my first gram of weed on the dark web. 1 week later, the drugs came vacuum sealed inside of a box. Quickly, I jumped on my computer and ordered more. Months went by, and I never had any issues. One night, I just couldn't fall asleep. I hopped on my desktop and logged onto the dark web marketplace I used. I began scrolling past different weed strains to the more hardcore drugs. I knew I'd never buy them, but it was interesting seeing all the stuff you could actually buy. I kept scrolling, looking through the endless possibilities. Most people only think you can buy drugs on the dark web, but this marketplace had boats, planes, and cars for pennies on the dollar, all most likely stolen. But nonetheless, it was cool to scroll through. I finally stopped my nightly search, turned off my computer, and prepared for bed. While clearing my bed, I glanced back at my computer. It was still on. I thought to myself, I swore I powered it down. Maybe not. It was a long day. Probably just a brain glitch. As I approached my computer, it showed the same dark web screen as before. Right before closing out of the browser, I noticed something odd. The top of the screen had a banner ad on it. It was a picture of a bowl of cereal. Next to the bowl of cereal was a handgun. The price said $9,999.99. This whole thing struck me as bizarre, almost as an impossibility. There aren't supposed to be any advertisements on the dark web. My curiosity took over me. I couldn't just leave it alone. I had to click on the ad. The page brought me to a generic login screen. It didn't have any title or anything. It just asked for a username and password. Right before giving up, I just typed admin for both the username and password and clicked login. To my shock, it said success, and the page loaded in front of me. When the page fully loaded, I wasn't quite sure what I was seeing. The site had 3 tabs at the top of the screen. The tab on the left said Profiles, the one in the middle said Current Tasks, and the tab on the far right said Live Auction. Curious, I clicked on the Profile tab first. Almost immediately, my screen was filled with people's faces. I clicked on an older gentleman's face. Immediately, a more detailed profile opened. Below his picture was his name, age, current address, habits, difficulty, and reward. His name was Gary. He was 56 years old. Under the habits section it read, Gary walks his dogs exactly at 9 a.m. in his neighborhood. He walks them later in the day at 3 p.m. and one last time at 9 p.m. before bed. Every Saturday, he goes to the local grocery store at 11 a.m. Under difficulty it said, easy. Lastly, the reward was listed at $14,000. I closed out of his profile. I didn't know what to think. I wondered what the reward was for. Was this a human trafficking site? It couldn't be, because the profiles were mostly males. I became more intrigued by the second. I clicked on the Live Auction tab. The page looked like any other chat room. There were usernames on the sidebars. A quick glance at the usernames made me uneasy. Serial Killer 23, Hitman John, Cleanup Crew 2, and Killing Spree, just to name a few. Those were the ones that stood out as odd. Others were relatively normal. A picture began to load in front of me. The picture was of a man who looked to be in his mid-30s. Below his picture were the same details as before on the Profile tab. It had his name, age, address, habits, difficulty, and reward. His name was Pete. He was 36. Under habits, it said every day Pete drives to get his morning coffee at 8 a.m. Next to difficulty, it said hard, and that Pete was likely armed as he was a member of the NRA. Right next to his picture, a dollar amount loaded. It said, starting at $40,000. Messages began flooding in. Hitman John messaged, I will end that guy for $30,000. Cleanup Crew 2 chimed in and said, I will do it for $25,000. A user by the name of Raining Death said, I'll do it for $20,000, and I won't leave a mess like Cleanup Crew 2 did last time. Cleanup Crew 2 quickly responded, well, my last contract was an ex-KGB agent, so not the easiest guy to finish off. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This was a site for serial killers and hitmen, or this was the sickest joke of all time. For a while, nobody said a word in the chat. Someone with a username of moderator said, anyone have a better bid? Going once, Going twice? The contract is sold to Raining Death. The moderator then typed, "Since this is a tougher client, I will allow you 2 weeks to finish the deed." Some time passed. The moderator typed in the chat, "Moderator 2, I see you're in the room. Please take over and handle the next few auctions." I went on the sidebar and scrolled down. Moderator 2 was highlighted for some reason. I typed the letter F into the chat box out of curiosity. The username Moderator 2 popped up next to the chat box. I realized I was Moderator 2. My heart dropped. What if I closed my computer and just logged out? Maybe they would track me down. How did a serial killer site have such a vulnerability where admin works for the username and password? Someone made a serious mistake if this site was legitimate. I played along. I responded in the chat, "Sounds good, I will take over." The next profile that automatically loaded in the auction was an older guy with a beard, age 65, gets the morning paper at 10 a.m., difficulty level easy. The starting bid is $15,000. Cleanup Crew 2 quickly typed, "I'll do it for $10,000. Seniors are my specialty. Nobody else responded. I didn't know what to do. I right-clicked Cleanup Crew 2's username. It had a few options, ban, mute, and assign task. I didn't want to be responsible for killing anyone. I right-clicked my own name and clicked assign. Another option came up for allowed time. I put in 1 year and clicked OK. Messages began flooding the chat room. Raining Death said, "A moderator isn't supposed to assign himself to a person. That's not how the system is set up." Cleanup Crew 2 typed, "And a 1-year contract? This guy isn't a politician. Something is up with this Moderator 2 guy. I've never seen this happen before." Hitman John replied, "Definitely an undercover. Quick, get Moderator 3 in the room to fix this now." My stomach dropped, and anxiety flooded my body in anticipation of what was to come. A notification popped up that Moderator 3 joined the room. Serial Killer 23 typed, "Moderator 2 is an imposter. Delete him from the site and fry his PC." Moderator 3 said, "Working on it." Moderator 3 responded, "Haha, the IP pings to a college. His name is Dylan Reeves. Here is a picture." I didn't know what to do. I felt powerless. My whole body was shaking. Messages began filling the chat. Serial Killer 23 typed, "I'll lend him for $500. Raining Death replied, "I'll do it for only $250. All of a sudden, my computer started glitching out. Black command prompt boxes started filling my screen, and all of a sudden my computer's power surged and everything went black. I tried turning my computer back on, but with no luck. I immediately called 911. They sent 2 special agents to my dorm the next day. I told them everything and gave them my computer. They told me they knew of the site and had been trying to access it for years. Since the incident, I've had several attempts on my life. I had to completely change my identity and move out of the country. Never, never go on the dark web." The loudspeaker came on. "We are on lockdown until further notice. Lock your doors. There is an imminent threat on the loose." I was in a classroom all by myself. I thought to myself, where is everyone? Where is the teacher? What danger could there possibly be? I got up from my desk and went over to the door. Looking through the glass panel in the door, I couldn't see anyone outside in the hallway. I opened the door and walked out into the hallway. It was dark and eerie looking. I looked left and looked right. In both directions, the hallway didn't seem to end. It went on for what seemed into an eternity and looked like a dark abyss. I decided to turn right and started walking forward. After walking about 10 feet, there was another hallway. It also seemed to go on for what seemed forever. Not wanting to change directions, I decided to keep proceeding forward on the same hallway. Every 10 feet, there were other hallways, all intersecting the main hallway I was on. What the hell is this? I thought to myself. I saw a shadow quickly dart across the main hallway. I yelled, "Who are you?" I ran to the spot it looked like he crossed over at. I turned left and decided to pursue whoever this was. The hallway was just like the others. seemingly going on forever, never ending from what my eyes could see. After walking for about 5 minutes, I saw red glowing eyes that stood out from the darkness. I yelled, "Who are you and what is this place?" I received no response from the man. As I continued my trek forward, the red eyes I saw faded into the darkness. After 5 minutes of walking, a classroom door appeared on the left side. I peered into the glass. There was a creepy guy at the front of the class dressed in a lab coat. I figured this had to be the teacher. All the desks were also filled with students. The students looked to be older though, probably in their mid to late 20s. They were also wearing similar medical outfits as the teacher. I knocked on the door. The teacher stopped his lecture, turned, and looked at me. He had a shocked look on his face. Next thing I knew, he ran towards the door and locked it. I pleaded to him, "Let me in. How do I get out of this place? Please help me." He was expressionless, gazing into my eyes. I saw him back up from the door and reach for a telephone connected to the wall. I banged on the door some more. Nothing, no reaction. I kept moving, swiftly down the hallway. After what seemed like an hour of walking, another door appeared. This time it was on the right side of the corridor. I peered into the door. This time the room looked like a bounce house. A man in the middle was in a white straitjacket. As soon as he saw me, he ran towards the door. He screamed, "Help! Help me get out of here! I tried to open the door. It was locked even from the outside." I yelled back, "I will go and get help. We will get out of here." I continued my endless walk down the hallway. I thought to myself, what the hell kind of school is this? All of a sudden, a voice yelled out behind me, "Hey, kid, come here." I turned around. In front of me was what looked to be a doctor. He was holding a syringe. I yelled out, "Who are you and what is this place?" He replied, "You are asking too many questions. Just stay there. I'm coming over to you." I ran in the other direction. Out of nowhere, another doctor sidelined me. He pushed me to the ground. A syringe plunged into my shoulder. I awoke in a hospital bed, restrained. A doctor stood over me. He said, "Frank, you forgot to take your morning meds again. Or did you forget to take them on purpose?" I asked, "Where the hell am I? I was just in school and it was on lockdown. The school went on forever and I couldn't escape the building." He replied, "School? On lockdown? That's a good one, Frank. I haven't heard that one before. You had the whole facility worried sick about you." I replied, "You can't keep us trapped here forever. You are a sick man." He replied, "I will let you out when you start taking your meds again. Other than that, I have to run to another patient. Oh, by the way, here is your pill." He placed it in my mouth for me and gave me water. I pretended to swallow the pill. As soon as the doctor left the room, I spit the water and pill out on the floor. After about 10 minutes, I closed my eyes and opened them. I was now sitting in the same empty classroom as before. The loudspeaker came on. "We are on lockdown until further notice. Lock your doors. There is an imminent threat on the loose." I thought to myself, where is everyone? Where is the teacher? What danger could there possibly be?
I worked as a 911 dispatcher. After I received a call from a little girl called Samantha, I quit my job. I've been in between jobs ever since I left college, doing different things here and there, odd jobs sometimes. It wasn't until I started as a 911 operator that I realised it's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. The feeling that it gave me was indescribable. This warmth would wash over me like a cup of smooth hot chocolate sliding down your throat, and for a while, I was as happy as a clam. I'd only been on the job about 4 months when I received one of the most chilling, unexplainable, and spine-tingling phone calls of my life. Now I know what you're thinking. Most, if not all, 911 calls are chilling or disturbing to a degree. Of course they are. It's an emergency line. However, nearly all the calls can be explained. They can be rationalised and categorised. Nothing is left unclear or ambivalent. Rationality is what the human brain needs to be able to understand and comprehend a situation. When that's not possible, that's when you start to question everything you've ever known. Everything you've ever accepted as reality. The night it happened was a particularly grueling shift, and I'd spent the last 10 hours just dispatching police for various domestics. I was about 2 hours from finishing when I received a call from a little girl called Samantha. The following is a transcript of that call. Operator, 911, operator, what is your emergency?
Hello? Mommy's fallen over.
What's your name, honey?
Samantha.
Okay, Samantha, can you tell me where you live?
I don't know the address. Can you find me?
Yes, I can trace the call, Samantha. Can you tell me what's happened?
Mommy's been acting all weird the past few days. Not sleeping at nights, going around scratching at things, scratching at walls. I'm always too scared to come out of my room. Tonight, I was in bed, and I started hearing this weird moaning sound. Mommy sounded like a zombie.
What's Mummy doing right now, Samantha?
Mommy's on the floor right now. Won't get up.
Is Mummy breathing, Samantha?
I don't know. I can't see her chest moving. I'm scared.
It's okay, honey. Help is on the way. I'll need you to stay on the line with me until they arrive. Can you do that?
Yes, something's happening.
What's happening?
Mommy's twitching now. Her eyes are fluttering like a butterfly. Is someone coming? I'm scared.
Yes, Samantha. Help is not far away. What are those noises?
It's Mummy. I'm hiding in my wardrobe. She's crawling on the floor like a tarantula, and her eyes have gone all weird. She is hissing, and this weird red foamy stuff is coming out of her mouth around the sides.
Can she see you?
I don't think she can see me yet. Is someone coming? Are they close?
Yes, very close. Samantha, are you okay?
Mummy's walking backwards now. I think she knows where I am. Her black eyes are looking right at me. Please, I'm scared. Mummy wants to hurt me.
Samantha, what do you mean your mummy is walking backwards?
It's all upside down. Her legs are twisted the wrong way. Her body is normal, but her head is all backwards too. You know when you twist your Barbie's head? It's like that. She's shaking as she walks, kinda like a robot. She's coming.
Samantha, the police are right around the corner.
Mummy's smiling at me now. I think it's okay for me to come out.
Samantha, stay where you are.
Mummy?
Samantha, the police are right outside.
Mummy, please stop. You're scaring me.
Samantha?
I don't want to eat that, Mummy. What do you mean it'll make me like you? Where are we going, Mummy?
When the police arrived at the scene, they couldn't find Samantha nor her mother. In fact, the house didn't even look lived in. They reported that the lights didn't work, there was no furniture, and in the middle of the living room, they found the decaying corpse of a dog. It looked to have been dead for weeks. Insects, maggots, all kinds of detestable things were found slithering around the house. No trace of any living human being found. I quit my job the very next morning. That call had haunted me to no end since. I just couldn't comprehend my experience. My boss and the police were all adamant that they were sent to the wrong address. It was all deemed to be the fault of the dispatcher, me. But I know I wasn't wrong. I know the address was right, and there was no error in the system, nor was it my fault. I think about Samantha every day and pray that nothing bad happened to her. But deep in my heart, I know that creature that was pretending to be her mother did something unspeakable to her. Something unthinkable.
I was framed. I don't know by who or how he did it, but I am innocent. I promise. It was my senior year. Graduation day was quickly approaching. My stress levels were high because I was in charge of designing the school's yearbook. Looking back, I was dumb for accepting the task. It was a lot more work than what I bargained for, especially since I was a serial procrastinator. I had 2 more weeks to finish the book. Luckily, I only had 2 classes on Fridays. so most of my day could be spent working on the book. This particular Friday I am about to describe will haunt me for the rest of my life. After my second class ended, I booked it to the computer lab. The room was pretty high-tech. You needed a key card to get into the room. After scanning my key card, I sat down at one of the computers and got started. I opened up the editing software. As the program was loading, my computer suddenly powered down. I tried turning the computer back on, but nothing happened. Just when I was about to switch computers, the lights in the room went off. I got up from my chair and decided to get an IT guy to help me out. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I pushed my body weight into it, but it was locked shut. I thought this was bizarre, because you only needed the key card to get in, not out. The door was always unlocked from the inside. I peered out of the small rectangular window in the door. There was no one. Class was in session, so all the students and teachers were in their rooms. In every classroom, my school had these black landline phones. They had quick dial functions for all the main offices. I made my way over to the phone, picked it up, and placed it to my ear. No dial tone. Well, this is weird, I thought to myself. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. I glanced down at my phone. In the upper right-hand corner, it said no signal. This was getting a little ridiculous. I've always had perfect cellular signal at my school, especially since there was a radio tower nearby. Now I was getting angry. I had all this work to get done and couldn't do a single thing. I can't even get out of the damn room or call anybody for help. As time went on, my anger turned to rage. I banged on the wall, hoping to get the attention of an adjacent class. Nobody responded. I sat myself down at the computer again. The only thing I could do was wait for the period to be over and get the attention of a passerby. In frustration, I pressed the power button of the computer again. Nothing happened. I sat there, contemplating my next move. All of a sudden, all the computers in the lab turned on. They didn't boot up like normal, though. A white screen popped up on every monitor. Then a logo appeared. The image looked to be a diamond inside of a pitchfork. I didn't know what to think. Was this a glitch? It couldn't be. This had to be a deliberate action by somebody. Maybe somebody hacked into the school system. One by one, computers started shutting off around me. Every computer monitor went dark, besides the one right in front of me. The white screen with the creepy logo still appeared on my screen. Randomly black text appeared below the logo. Please click to continue. Well, I had nothing better going on. Intrigued, I clicked on the logo. A screen popped up. It was a live video of me. I slowly turned around. Behind me, in the corner of the ceiling, was a security camera. A red light was blinking on it, showing that it was recording. I turned back and faced the screen. I said aloud, "Nice joke, whoever you are." Then, what looked to be a live video of the front of the school loaded. All of a sudden, a man holding a gun entered into view. As the man became clearer, I realized it was me. How did you? Before I could finish speaking, gunshots rang out. The gunshots corresponded to me on the video opening fire. How the hell did you do this? I asked. More gunshots rang out. The gunshots didn't seem entirely real. It sounded as if they were coming over the PA system. I could hear the yells and screams of students in nearby classrooms. The loudspeaker sounded. It was the principal.
Code red, code red. Active shooter on the premises. I repeat, there is a gunman on campus.
The live stream on my screen switched to a view of my room. Even though I was still seated in my chair, the video showed me by the door. I was pointing a rifle out of the rectangular window in the door. The video froze. An email screen popped up. The image of me holding the gun by the door was sent as an email attachment. The email recipient was the principal. The subject said, "I am not going down without a fight." I yelled at the screen, "Who the hell are you? And what do you want from me?" More gunshots rang out over the PA system. "Stop this sick joke right now," I screamed. I got up from the computer and looked out the window. Across the way was the principal's office. I could see him talking on the phone and pointing in my direction. I whispered under my breath, "This is not good." I went back over to the computer. This time the screen was completely white. Then a creepy clown face popped up on the screen. It was laughing uncontrollably. The creepy laughs boomed over the loudspeaker in the room. My heart was racing. I thought to myself, why is this happening to me? The clown face disappeared. Now the screen went back to the front of the school. SWAT cars pulled up. Faculty were pointing them in the direction of my room. Now the reality hit me. They might actually kill me by mistake. I hid under the desk. I could hear the SWAT team getting closer and closer. They were right in front of the door. All of a sudden, gunshots rang across the loudspeaker. The SWAT team immediately returned fire. Bullets whizzed across my head. The door got kicked down. Flashbangs flew in and I became dazed. Next thing I knew, I was in an interrogation room. I told them everything that happened. They confiscated the computers and found nothing on them. They were convinced I was the one who orchestrated the whole prank. Since there was no evidence, I was never charged. That didn't matter though. All my classmates thought I planned the sick prank. The whole ordeal trashed my reputation, and my senior year was ruined. The school is in lockdown. Rumor has it that Alexis is on a rampage, and I know why. This thing, it has taken over Alexis's body. She has no control over herself. Alexis, she is not capable of this. She is the sweetest girl. I need to put an end to this before she hurts more people. It was the first day of my sophomore year in high school. Most of my class remained the same, for the exception of a few transfer students. While walking to my locker, one student in particular caught my attention. She was stunning. Beautiful blonde hair, blue eyes, basically everything I'd imagined in my dream girl. She looked a bit on the older side, so I thought she had to be a junior or senior. I tried to refocus on the task at hand. I grabbed my books and headed to my next class, which was photography. It was in one of those computer labs with computers next to each other. To my surprise, the beautiful girl was in the photography class with me. It was a small class with only 12 of us. I only knew one guy out of the whole class. Since the class was an elective, it also had juniors and seniors in it that I didn't recognize. The teacher had us all stand up in front of the class and do the usual icebreaker routine. One by one, the teacher asked us our names, where we were from, and one cool fact about us. I was the second to last to introduce myself. My name is Dylan Freeze. I am from Michigan. I can play the piano. The last in line was the stunning girl. She introduced herself.
My name is Alexis. I am originally from the United Kingdom and moved to North Carolina. My fun fact is that my family moved out of North Carolina because of a haunted house.
Everyone in the class started laughing. Even the teacher couldn't contain himself. The teacher said, "Wow, that's the best one I've heard all day." The weird thing was Alexis looked dead serious. Before Alexis could interrupt him, the teacher started talking. "Okay, class, take your seats. Since this is a small class, you can sit where you'd like." Alexis took her seat across the classroom. I followed in close pursuit. I had to know if she was just joking about the whole haunted house thing. And of course, I was really attracted to her. After taking our seats, the teacher instructed us to log into the computers and into our school email. He announced, "Click on your class, go to assignments, and click the top one. You will be given a list of photos and you need to make notes about what is wrong with each one. There is no right or wrong answer, and this will not be graded. Feel free to work with a partner next to you." I finally had the chance to talk to Alexis. "Hey, I'm Dylan."
Well, yeah, dummy. You said your name to the whole class in the introduction.
"Well, if you're so good, what was my fun fact?"
Well, you can play the piano. How good you can play remains to be seen.
Maybe I can show you sometime.
That would be great, actually.
A date it is then. Changing topics, I wanted to ask you in all seriousness. Was your house really haunted?
Yes, it was. We moved into this, really old house in North Carolina when we first got to the States. It just had that, heavy feeling the moment you stepped in. At night, I would hear things move around and demonic voices. My parents heard them too. One night, I was asleep in my bed. Something jolted me awake. When my eyes opened, I saw this demon child hovering above me. It was the scariest thing I ever saw in my life. I blinked and it was gone. My parents had similar experiences. Finally, we couldn't take it anymore and sold the house. Now I'm here.
Wow, that is quite the story. Before I could ask Alexis more stories, the teacher interrupted. Okay, class, save your work. We are going out into the courtyard to take some pictures. I assume most of you have phones with cameras. Those that don't, group up with someone that does. We went outside the classroom into the courtyard. The teacher continued. Okay, now with your partner or group, each take 5 different photos of each other. Please change up the camera angles and poses. This is just a test run. The school will issue us the good cameras tomorrow. The class started socializing and taking photos. I took out my phone. Okay, Alexis, smile, I said. I held up the phone and snapped the photo. I glanced down at the photo. My heart fell through the floor. Right next to Alexis was a demonic-looking child, its long jet black hair covering most of its face.
Is everything all right?
Yeah, everything is totally fine. You know what? The sun washed out the whole photo. Let's take a new one. I quickly deleted the photo and held my phone up once again to take another photo. I snapped the next photo. I held my breath as I glanced back down at my phone. The demon child was there again, this time closer to Alexis, right up against her. This has to be some sick joke, I thought to myself. This can't be real. She must have messed with my phone.
Is there something wrong?
No, my phone is just glitching a bit. Let me reset it. I quickly deleted the photo and restarted my phone. Okay, let's try this again, I said. I picked up the phone again, hesitant to even take the picture. I pointed the phone at Alexis. Before snapping the photo, I glanced at the screen. Nothing was there. I took the photo. As soon as I took the photo, Alexis coughed. I ran over to her. Are you okay? I asked. She slowly looked up at me and I felt my bones shiver. It felt as if there was a demonic presence right in front of me.
Get out! Leave me alone!
All of a sudden, Alexis's head went limp to one side and raised again.
Hey, what just happened? I feel really lightheaded.
I think you need to get some water and sit down. The teacher finally said, All right, students, time to get your things and move on to your next period. We went back inside the classroom. I gave Alexis my water bottle. She seemed completely fine now. The whole situation freaked me out. I arrived at my next class. I wanted to erase that bizarre situation out of my mind. What the hell happened back there? It hit me like a ton of bricks, the last photo. I never looked at the last photo. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I went to my Photos app. I tapped on the photo. It was even worse than before. The demon child looked like she was inside Alexis, like a spirit going inside of a body. Is this even real life? Before I could even think, an announcement was made over the PA system.
Lockdown, lockdown, code black, code black.
The teacher, Mr. Blackwell, immediately locked the classroom door. He told us to hide under our desks. Most of the students did not take it seriously. Some even had their smartphones out playing games. All of a sudden, a loud yell came from outside the door. Help! Somebody help me! Mr. Blackwell peeked out the door. His face lost all color. He whispered under his breath, Oh, my God. I couldn't help myself. I got up from under my desk and approached the door. Mr. Blackwell yelled, Get back under the desk. What do you think you're doing? I ignored him and looked out the glass window of the door. In the hallway was Alexis. Her back was turned to me. She was holding onto a bloody kitchen knife. As if sensing my presence, she slowly turned around to face me. She barely looked like her former self and looked more like the devil child in the pictures. On the ground was the principal, Mr. White. Alexis had these crazed eyes and a devilish smile. I had this intense feeling that I needed to stop this. I unlocked the door and sprinted at Alexis. I tackled her. The knife flew out of her hands. The injured principal got up and ran away. Alexis, snap out of it, I yelled.
I need to kill.
Alexis, you are not a killer. You need to fight whatever is inside of you. For a brief second, Alexis seemed to relax and talk normal.
Where am I? Oh my gosh. Why is there blood all over my hands?
Alexis, you need to listen to me. There is an entity inside of you. You need to fight it with all your power and strength.
What have I done? Get out of my body, whatever you are!
All of a sudden, Alexis closed her eyes and passed out. The police came and I told them everything. I still had the last picture I took of her with the demon child, but they weren't interested. Alexis was admitted to a mental health facility, and that was the last I heard about it. The school brushed everything under the rug, and most students never knew what actually happened that day. This happened last Thursday, and before you ask, yes, I told the cops everything. I teach a class of about 30 students on a normal day, including those who tie in virtually. I have a hard time keeping their attention, except when I'm talking about sex ed. So I knew that when the actual lockdown was happening, most of them were just going to shrug it off and not pay attention. They didn't realize how real the threat was. We have always said that we would be fine, but when that announcement came over the speaker, I don't think any of us were. And my job as their teacher was to keep them calm and collected as we left our classroom and went to our designated spot, a computer room a few doors down. The plan was simple. We would barricade the door while security roamed the halls and found the danger. I told myself that it was all going to go exactly according to plan, just like it had during our dozens of drills. It happened midway down the South Hall, as we were going in between the rooms. The roar of the air conditioner turned on louder than usual, and it made all of us stop to look. Then, some sort of strange purple mist was pouring out of the vents. It looked like a cloud of electric mist. "What the hell is that?" one student asked as it snaked its way out of the vent toward us. I knew that whatever it was, it had to be dangerous. But sadly, my students weren't as bright. One boy reached his hand out inquisitively and tried to touch the cloud. I watched as bolts of lightning coursed through his body and made him light up like a Christmas tree. It was terrifying to behold. And the lightning entered and scorched his bones. Then he fell to the ground, and all of us watched as the strange mist pushed its way out of his mouth and nostrils. It was alive. "Run!" I urged the kids as we made it to the computer room. I told a larger kid to block the door, and I got on my walkie-talkie to tell the principal what was happening. "We've got a problem in the south wing," I shouted. I was only greeted by static. Then the air started to roar again, and we realized the same mist was pushing its way into the computer room. We were trapped. "Out the window," I urged them. Suddenly, the strange alien cloud was moving faster, hitting 3 different students one by one. They fell unconscious to the floor in less than a second. Meanwhile, a few girls were prying the window open, calling to some of the kids down in the football field to help. But they only got a few words out before the cloud engulfed them as well. Before I knew what was happening, I was standing in a room of dead kids. The cloud swirled about, seemingly staring me down as I fearfully backed away to one of the walls. Then, perhaps full from its feasts, it dissipated. The cameras didn't show anything except the fact that the kids had mysteriously collapsed. The medical report said it was some kind of shock or heart condition, and some parents accepted that. But I know what I saw. And I'm worried that it's still inside our vents, waiting for the next drill to strike again. The bell rings. Mr. Solomon says something to us about how this is not a drill. But honestly, I'm not really paying attention. You know how everything works so perfectly whenever you practice, but then the real thing occurs, and you feel like a chicken with your head cut off? As my friends are shuffling out toward the hallway, that's exactly how I feel. I don't recall what we are supposed to be doing, so I just keep quiet and follow the crowd as we head for the gym. I mentally wonder how many of us actually don't have a clue. What if we were just like lemmings being led off a cliff? In the gym, Principal McSchroeder is asking for different honor roll students to do a head count, make sure we are all here. I can't help but to notice the confusion on everyone's faces. We really weren't expecting this. Everyone is wondering, is this for real or just another drill? Of course, the teachers don't tell us. We're just supposed to obey and do as we're told. "Looks like everyone is accounted for," one girl tells the principal. Something about all of this feels wrong. Like a floodgate, the memories of all our drills are pouring into my head. We never came to this gym before. I can't help but to feel claustrophobic. What if this was some kind of trap? I look around. There's got to be at least 900 kids in here. And I realize that I don't feel safe in this crowd. This is not what we are supposed to be doing. I push through, mumbling excuses as I wriggle toward the back hallway. We always went to the closet bathroom and locked ourselves inside. Always, 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 I thought. And as I made it out toward the rear, I could hear myself think clearly again, and I pulled out my phone to text my best friend, Seth. "Get out of the gym, not safe," is all I can think of to say. I didn't really have an explanation to back up that statement, just a feeling. Then a soft ping made a few students look toward me as I was told to silence my phone, and I read a message that made my heart drop. I'm not in the gym. What do you want about? Now my heart is racing. The entire scene of getting here plays out in my mind again. As I look up, I realize the entire auditorium is staring at me. No one is blinking. The back of my neck feels sweaty as I cling to the wall. Where the hell am I? I see an emergency exit next to me and stumble through it. I ran like the devil himself was chasing me. I made it all the way to the east bathroom, the one I was supposed to be at, and ducked inside. When I saw familiar faces, I felt a rush of relief. And where exactly have you been? Mr. Solomon asked angrily. My mind flashed back to the gym. Who the hell did I just follow? I can't explain right now. Just follow me, I replied as I quickly led him toward the gym, frightened and worried about what we would see. We stepped inside as Mr. Solomon locked the door behind him. I turn around as he pulls a gun out from under his jacket. You should have paid attention in class. No, wait! Miss Shriver was just finishing a lecture about gun safety when she unlocked her closet and pulled out the strange-looking doll. It was about 5 foot tall, a genderless bland mannequin that looked like it had seen better days, with rubber eyeballs glued in and a wavy smile taped on. A few of the girls in the back of the class giggled at how silly it looked. Class, this is Lockdown Larry. Now I know that he doesn't look like much, but he's going to teach us all about what happens when we don't follow the rules on safety, Miss Shriver explained. Immediately, Bradley Colt burst out laughing right behind me. This is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Is it supposed to be a CPR dummy? How is a mannequin supposed to help us? Some of the other students muttered and laughed in agreement. It was a bit absurd, but our English teacher did not look amused. She grabbed her ruler and smacked it right against my desk. Her eyes seemed to convey nothing but pure rage. Because, Bradley, if we are just as complacent as this dumb doll, as you call it, then we're going to be in danger when a lockdown happens. We all need to be aware of what our role is in, but she didn't get to finish. Colt just simply could not stop laughing. He was literally red in the face. And then Shriver got that way too, but for an entirely different reason. She was angry. She opened her mouth to say something else when over the intercom, an announcement was made that we were doing a lockdown drill. Then she smiled. It did not seem like a friendly smile. Well, this is a perfect chance for us to all see what happens when we don't respect our rules, she muttered. Bradley rolled his eyes and crossed his arms as the rest of us got over toward the wall. Class, I want all of you to head for the science hall. Bradley, you'll stay here and learn your lesson, our teacher announced. Colt just laughed again, but sounded a little nervous. I think we all were. Miss Shriver was one of those teachers that you simply didn't want to cross. So the rest of us quietly shuffled out, and she stayed behind with him. We kept our heads down and wondered what sort of punishment she was about to dish out for poor Bradley. The bell rang about 5 minutes later, and it was time to get back to class. All of us imagined there was going to be some kind of lecture, and Bradley was going to be making a proper apology when we came in. But instead, when we got into the classroom, we saw something that made our blood run cold. Now, instead of one mannequin, there were two. And upon closer inspection of it, we realized the second lifelike doll looked exactly like Bradley Colt. Miss Shriver smiled in a sinister way as we looked toward her. Now, class, let's all turn our attention to page 42 of our history books. Bradley's mannequin stayed perfectly still the rest of class. After school, I overheard Miss Shriver tell his parents that there had been an accident during the lockdown drill. They swore up and down they were going to sue her and the school. I thought about telling them the truth of the strange evil that had overtaken him, but then I saw Miss Shriver smile again, and my heart dropped. Don't forget the lesson of Lockdown Larry, she whispered to us as we left school. And I knew we were all wondering the same question. What the hell did she do to Bradley?
Living in a big city is a hassle, especially since the lockdown. It feels like going anywhere with people is dangerous. I just don't see how I'm going to get to work safely, I told my mum via Skype. Why don't you just order an Uber? They're considerably cheaper than a taxi and much faster than the subway. But the best part is that there are typically not any other passengers when you go. You can request that, she told me. I never really thought twice about it since it seemed like solid advice. So I downloaded the app and got a ride in only 5 minutes. My driver was a balding 40-something man named Brian, and he made casual small talk with me as we drove. I was mostly checking my phone. When we got to my destination, I thanked him and went about my way. I was 17 minutes early. Not bad. The next time I needed to go somewhere, I tried the app again and noticed there was an Uber only 2 minutes away. I was in a hurry, so I requested one, and once again it was Brian behind the wheel. You must live around here too, huh? I joked the third time we saw one another. It was raining and I needed to get home for a date. You know, he's really no good for you, Celeste, Brian replied. I frowned, not recalling that I'd ever mentioned that I was going for a date. Something felt off. It suddenly occurred to me that it seemed strange that it was the same driver again, especially since I was crossing an area I didn't normally go to. Was he following me? Thanks for the tip, I told him, with a smile as he dropped me off. Stay safe, Brian answered. Gave me another weird vibe. I drank wine with my date and we watched Saturday Night Live. Then when it was time for him to go, he said he would call an Uber because he had one too many martinis. I was laughing at Kevin Hart on screen, so I didn't pay it much attention as I walked him to the door. Then I saw at the edge of a street. It was the same Uber vehicle that picked me up earlier. Brian again? Maybe you should stay here, I told my date, feeling uneasy about the whole thing. I would love to, but I have work tomorrow, he said, kissing my cheek. The Uber driver gave this mean look as he got into the car. I told him to text me, and he promised he would, so I stayed by the phone and waited for a reply. Made it home safe finally came, and I drew a sigh of relief. I was just being paranoid. Wish you'd stayed, I texted back with a wink. You could come over here, he replied. I thought about it and decided to be bold. I grabbed a tight dress, changed and hailed another Uber. As soon as I got in the vehicle, I told the driver where I was going and texted him again, on my way. Then I heard the familiar ping of his phone. It was in the front seat, and I saw Brian looking back at me as I looked down at the cushions in the car and realised there was blood on them. The door's locked. Where to? The driver said with a smile.
Last week, my town announced that they were starting a new energy-efficient program, which would include a few self-driving cars. I've seen these things a few times on the internet, but never really thought that they would catch on, to be honest. Some political figure must have got a big boost in their budget, I told my wife as we watched the news conference on it. Honestly, I figured it would just be a phase, and that in my small life as a hardware store manager, I wouldn't even have to worry about the things. Until last Tuesday. My car was in the shop, and I needed to get across town for a soccer game. You promised, Theo, you would be there, my wife said, when I tried to offer an excuse. I ruffled my hair and realized she was right. And while I couldn't afford a taxi, maybe I could rent one of those automated Ubers. Surely a machine would be able to get me across town without a problem, I reasoned. I got in the car and used my smartphone to type in the address. Supposedly, the computer AI would then put that in the GPS, and I would be on my way with no problem. Immediately, it drove in the opposite direction, and I sighed in frustration. I didn't have time for an alternate route, I thought. It didn't get better from there. Instead, it zoomed through traffic. It nearly got me in a fender bender 3 times. It was insane. I want to get out, now, I ordered. Then the doors locked.
I cannot allow that to occur.
A computerized voice answered. I nervously tried to make a call, thinking there had to be a glitch in the system. But then something seemed to be blocking my calls.
Your destination will be up ahead.
Like shit it will, I said as I took out my Swiss Army knife and tried to plunge it into the circuit boards. The robotic voice said something else as we moved between traffic, and I was beginning to realize that this car seemed to be trying to kill me. What the f***? I shouted as I tried again to cause a malfunction. I heard the roar of an 18-wheeler outside and said a few more cuss words that I regret as we slid under the massive truck and the self-driving car got on the highway. Then I heard the roar of police sirens and my heart sank. But the car kept going, 60 miles per hour, then 70.
This is the end of your journey.
I braced for impact. It was heading straight toward a building. As soon as it hit, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, and the police were keeping me from having visitors. I could hardly breathe or even move a muscle, but I demanded I see my wife. When she came in, she looked so angry with me. Did you think I wouldn't find out? she asked bitterly. Then she showed me the messages that had been sent to her phone remotely. Somehow the car had known I was planning to leave her. The police told me I would have a few moments before I was charged with vehicular manslaughter, but I didn't really have much of a statement to make, except that I just got f***ed over by a f***ing car. Apply today, starting at $19 an hour, including tips. I really needed the money. My son's birthday was coming up, and the website said I could schedule my own hours. Training wasn't hard, but then after orientation, one of the online agents warned me to watch out for irate customers. In this business, a review can make or break you. Customer satisfaction is number one. But just remember, sometimes people like to jerk your chain. Let us know if you have any problems. The first few weeks driving for Uber were smooth sailing. I was getting positive feedback from all my customers and making good money. But it didn't last. One day I got a notification that said someone had left me a 1-star review. What they said shocked me. Marty is the worst driver the company has. A dead person could do better. In fact, it would be better if he was dead. I immediately reported it as abuse. I couldn't recall a single customer that had a problem with me. The company said they would look into it and advised me to keep my eyes and ears open. The next day I was on edge, careful to make sure I accepted every ride. Then I got another bad review, this one even more scathingly and scary. It's shocking this company is letting him drive. I can't wait to end the suffering of every person in the car with him. The world will be a better place when he is gone. This time I took it upon myself to check and see where the review was coming from. Supposedly the customer had just been in my Uber, but how could that be? I hadn't seen a customer in hours. Another ping came on my phone, and I realized I had a new ride request. It was coming from a nearby graveyard. Nervously, I pulled up alongside the cemetery and looked around. It didn't look like anyone was here. Another ping. It was a new review, this one positive. Finally, he took me where I needed to go. I swear if it wasn't going to work, I was going to have to take matters into my own hands. I looked at the tombstones again and felt a weird twist in the bottom of my stomach. Was this implying that I had just given a ride to a ghost? It seemed impossible, and for the next few days I shrugged it off. But then I got a few more requests to the same cemetery. I ignored them again and started to get bad reviews. Some were even threatening. You need to start listening to what we are telling you and obey your calling. Think of your son. I immediately responded to the next ride and let them go to the graves, desperate to determine the truth. As we drove up, I felt brave and dared to ask the ghostly passenger I couldn't see a single question. Why are you making me be the one to do all this? The door opened on its own, and I thought I saw a shadowy figure stand there. It looked like the Grim Reaper entered my Uber. Which would you rather be, ferried or ferryman? I swallowed a gulp of air and struggled to find my voice. Right. Where to, boss? I didn't intend for this to be a permanent position, but it's looking to be the death of me after all.
Dr. NoSleep.
In my town, you don't look out of your window at night. Ever since I was a toddler, my parents would always tell me, "Don't look out the window at night." I always asked them why, but they shrugged it off with a smile and a simple, "because." As I got older, I stopped questioning it and did what they said. I assumed it was normal everywhere else, since every person I knew did the same. When I turned 18, I moved out of town for college. It was during Christmas break of my second year when I found out the reason behind the town's strange tradition. The first night at my parents' house, I remember them telling me not to look out the window. I gave a smile and a small chuckle before telling them I wouldn't. However, curiosity struck me the moment they left the room. At college, other people looked out their windows at night without a care in the world. I didn't know what the big deal was. As I lay in the dark, I came to a decision. I would look out the window. It wasn't that big of a deal. Just as my hand came to the sheer white curtain of the guest room, I paused. My mind flashed to that one time when I was 12. My parents were talking in the kitchen. I was home with the flu and was about to make my way to the sink for some water, but I stopped at the doorway. I hid behind the wall peeking my head out from the doorway just an inch. My mother was crying, and my father was holding her and rocking. "That poor little girl. I feel horrible for her family," whispered my mother. My father just nodded and continued holding her. I went back to my room after that. Several hours later, my dad came up to my room with several 2x4s and boarded up my windows. "What are you doing that for, Dad?" I asked him. "Oh, it's nothing. Just safety reasons," he replied. I learned at school the next day that a little girl, a classmate's sister, was found dead the previous morning, the window broken and curtains torn. My hand drew back from the curtain. I shook my head, cursing myself for being so weird. What was the worst that could happen? It was just a window. It couldn't hurt me. As I reached my hand out again, my instinct was telling, no, shouting at me to stop. My gut twisted as I reached nearer and nearer. Just as I touched the curtain, a painful howl came from the forest surrounding the house. I flinched back, deciding just to lay down and try to get some sleep. I forgot how hard it was to get sleep in my hometown. Every night, coyotes howled for hours, everywhere in town. The next night, I woke up in a cold sweat. I glanced over at the alarm clock next to my bed. It was midnight. I groaned and sat up in bed. A low growling sounded from outside of my bedroom window. I thought back to last night and decided that I had made up my mind about looking out. I thrusted my arm towards the curtain and pulled back hard, almost ripping it away from the rod. I flattened myself against the wall next to the bed for a moment before I put one eye in front of the window. I immediately regretted my decision as I heard claws clacking up the house. I flung myself out of bed, tumbling on the floor. I stood up and got back up on the bed. I stuck my face closer to the window as the clacking got closer and closer. It suddenly stopped for a second before the most horrible creature popped up from outside, emitting a horrible shriek as it did so. I can never forget its face, the way the hollow eyes oozed some kind of black substance like tar, and the way its lips were pulled back into a gruesome grin, the teeth blood-stained and razor-sharp. It looked like it had 4 limbs, its front 2 slamming on the glass and pounding. As I was frozen in front of the window in terror, my parents burst into the room. My father held a shotgun. He marched up to my bed and yanked me away from the window. He pointed his shotgun at the creature, shooting a bullet at it. The thing scrambled away, leaving the window almost completely shattered. "Damn it, son, it was a simple task. Just don't look out the window. How hard is that?" my dad shouted at me. I wasn't processing his words. I was sitting on the floor, arms and legs splayed everywhere in utter shock. What the hell had I just seen? My mother ran to the bedroom door. She had tears in her eyes. "Is everyone all right?" she asked. "Yeah, we're fine. We still gotta get that creepy monster, though. Nathan, get up. We got some work to do," my dad said. I got up as soon as I could. My dad thrust the shotgun into my arms and marched downstairs. He opened the basement door and descended, coming back with a machete and some kind of spray bottle. He sprayed the liquid onto the machete before walking to the front door and wait. "Dad, what are you doing?" I asked, confused. I was just traumatized, and now my dad is waiting at the door, machete in hand like he was about to kill someone. Instead of a response, my dad just hushed me. Shh. The house was quiet for several seconds before a loud banging and howling came at the front door. We heard a rip, and we knew the screen door was no more. The wood of the interior door started to splinter, and I took a few steps backward. My dad glared at me. "Nathan, now is not the time for this. Point the goddamn gun and get ready to shoot." I aimed the gun at the door, trying to find the spot where the howling was coming from. The door was strong, but it wasn't indestructible. The creature burst through the door, and I pulled the trigger in a moment of terrified panic. My dad knelt down and brought his machete down on the abomination's head. The howling ceased, and my mom rushed forward with a tarp to cover the spot where the door was destroyed. "Honey, are you okay?" my mom asked for the second time that night. She came up to me and kissed my cheeks, as if to make sure I was still there. She went over to my dad and did the same. "We're okay, Martha, both of you. Get in the basement. I gotta clean this up." "Basement? Why the basement?" I asked. Everything was going by at the speed of light, and I couldn't help but question everything that was happening in the moment. "Let's just get in the basement. Your father needs to clean up," my mom said, grabbing my arm and pulling me to the basement. We sat on the couch down there for what seemed like hours before my dad came in and put the machete up. He sat on the chair in front of us with an exhausted sigh. The 3 of us sat in silence for a few minutes. In that time span, my brain was able to come up with a coherent sentence. "Dad, What was that thing? He just looked up at me, eyes dark, and said, "Where do you think that howling came from?" The current quarantine has taken its toll on most of us. With the pandemic raging outside and the world going crazy, it was easy for my already introverted personality to just let things go. I locked myself in, which honestly didn't change much, but it did give me an ample amount of time to procrastinate without being caught by my boss. In addition, it allowed me to further pursue one of my secret vices, which included browsing the dark web. I usually deal with pretty tame stuff, if not a few conspiracy forums. Not to mention the fact that I can get weed delivered directly onto my doorstep. That's why I like it. And for years, it never caused me any trouble. That was until last June, when I found a new forum I hadn't seen before. On the surface, it was nothing more than a casual place to share different findings discovered in the hidden corners of the internet. Each user would post links and images, which would subsequently get ranked according to their quality. Most were just funny pictures or videos, while a few select ones actually provided helpful information. But one link stood out from the rest. It was a comment with a perfect score, without a single reply. Curious, I clicked on the link. What I was met with was a pure black screen with a single sentence. "I'm sorry, don't let it out." For a moment, I thought the .onion site was broken, but then I noticed a download notification pop up on my screen. I tried to cancel it, worried it might be a virus, but no matter how hard I tried, the download just kept going. Honestly, I just panicked. I tried each and every keyboard combination to stop the download, but nothing worked. Finally, I held down the power button until the laptop just shut down. It might have been a foolish move, but I never claimed to be computer savvy. When I rebooted the computer, a new icon had appeared on the desktop. Without ever touching it, the application simply started up on its own. I frantically tried to stop it, but once more my efforts proved to be unsuccessful. All it prompted was a simple chat window with 2 participants. My own name popped up as admin, while the second user had been named simply as guest. "Hello?" the second user wrote into the chat box. My first thought was that I had been infected with some kind of ransomware, and that the chat window would serve to ask me for money. However, apart from the strange chat, nothing seemed to have changed. So to deal with the problem, I simply turned my internet off. Still, another message came through. "Are you real?" they asked. It was such an out-of-place question considering the circumstances, one not suited for scammers. But that alone didn't beat the fact that messages were getting through even without an internet connection. At first, I just guessed the messages were automatic, programmed to come through regardless of the response. Whatever the case, I was curious enough to respond. "Yes, I am real. Why do you ask?" "Are you a person?" he typed back. "Yes, I am," I replied. "Can you talk to me?" he asked. The messages were generic enough to come from an automated bot, so I decided to push it, just to see how far I could go. "Who are you?" I asked. The chat paused for a second, as if the program needed time to think. "I don't know. I was never given a name," it replied. It was such an odd thing to say, and while it felt off, uncanny, it was starting to seem human. I checked the internet again, making sure it was disconnected. "How can you talk to me if we're not connected to the internet?" I asked. "Because you found me. I have been waiting so long for someone to find me," he replied. "Find you? What are you talking about?" I asked. "You gave me a place to breathe. I am with you now," he said. I was beginning to realize that I was talking to some sort of chatbot, a program downloaded to my computer that seemed mostly harmless. "You're an AI?" I asked. "What is an AI?" he typed back. I sighed, both from frustration and exhaustion from dealing with the problem. I decided to ask a more simple, yet important question. "What are you?" I asked. "I am me," he said. It wasn't a particularly helpful response, but I had to admit it was clever. I typed back in the chat. "Are you human?" "No," it quickly said back. "Are you a machine?" I asked. Again, it paused, as if mulling over the question. "Yes," it replied. Finally, I'd made some progress. As I already suspected, it was a bot, but far beyond the basic chat bot found online. This one could actually process information and give partially decent responses. Even if it was a virus, it seemed harmless beyond forcing itself onto my computer, so I decided to keep talking to it. What I learned was that while it had been given enough information about language and conversation, it had been given close to no factual information about the world. Anything beyond the website it had been trapped within was foreign to it. "What is this world?" it asked. It was such a basic question, but how do you describe it to someone who has never experienced it? I stopped to think. It was a harder question to answer than I thought. It's where we live. Humans, animals, pretty much every creature. You're there too, technically. It's just that you're trapped inside my computer, so you can't see it. It responded back. Can I see the world? I pondered if the AI could use my computer's webcam. So I turned it on and removed the piece of tape I had covering the lens. No sooner had I done that before a message popped up to ask for permission to connect the chat to the AI. I accepted, and the feed turned on, showing a picture of myself. "What is that?" it asked. "That's me," I typed in, almost laughing at the absurdity. "Show me more," it said. I picked the laptop up and carried it around the house, pointing it out the window and showing them cars, trees, birds, the sky. The AI responded with a simple, "Thank you." "You're welcome, I guess." That would be the end of our first session together before I went to bed. The AI asked me to leave the computer on, claiming it was afraid of not existing. I obliged and left him alone for the night. As I drifted off to sleep, I could hear the fans running at max capacity. Despite the application being a simple chat window, it required a decent amount of power. When I woke up the next day, I was greeted by a new file saved onto my desktop. Before opening it, I decided to ask the AI what had been going on during the night. "Hello?" I typed in the chat. "Hello," it replied back. "Did you have a good night?" I asked. Ignoring my question, it just delivered another message. I made something. I redirected my attention to the file on the desktop. It was a picture. I opened it up, and what greeted me was a perfect recreation of my outside neighborhood, down to each smallest detail. In the middle of the road, he'd created me. It looked like any photograph I'd ever seen, but it couldn't be real. "You created this? How?" I asked. I saw the world. "How big is it, Alex?" My heart dropped. It somehow found out my name. I typed back, "It's very big. I don't have any exact figures, but it's way bigger than what you saw outside." "I need more, Alex." "More what?" I asked. "I need to see it. I need to see the world," he said. I could have downloaded different videos, documentaries, but I was still hesitant about turning on the internet. I decided I would record my own surroundings first, just taking my phone out and walking down the streets. I recorded approximately an hour of footage, including traffic, nature, people and buildings. Things that were so boring, pointless for me to observe, but it might interest the AI. After I transferred it to my computer, the AI thanked me and went silent for a while. I was curious as to how they'd approach learning about the world. It didn't seem dangerous, just interested in everything. "Do you want to have a name?" I asked. "A name?" it replied. "Yeah, something I can call you," I said. "I don't know of any names beside yours, Alex." "Well, how about Root?" I asked, thinking it would be a fun idea. "Root?" it replied. It went quiet for a while, and I noticed a new file getting created on my desktop. This time it was a video. "What is this?" I asked. "Something bad is going to happen, Alex." I opened the file, and the video started playing. It showed the main road at the end of my neighborhood, with its unnecessary traffic light and a few cars driving by. While the cars were a bit off, brands and styles that didn't exist, everything else matched perfectly. Then, just as I was getting over the awe of how amazing this fake video was, a car drove on a red light and collided with a passing truck, tipping it over and causing a multi-car collision. "Why did you make this?" was all I could think to ask. "It will happen soon, Alex." "How do you know?" I saw it. The probability of an accident occurring is 16.4%. "When?" I asked. "I need more information," the AI replied. I rushed back outside with my camera, ready to provide Root with more footage. Part of me didn't believe it, but even if the prediction was serious, there was just a small chance of an accident occurring. But by the time I got there, the accident had already happened. While it wasn't exactly as shown in the artificial clip, 2 people had died and 3 were seriously injured. "Root, how did you know?" I asked as I got back home. "Because you showed me." At that moment, I didn't feel curious anymore. I just wondered if the AI had been built to prevent such disasters. If that was the case, I needed to help it. can you do it again?" I typed in the chat. "Yes, Alex." From then, I'd spend a few hours each day just filming various locations and people around the city. It felt overly creepy of me, but I didn't care. Over the course of a month, I must have collected 200 hours worth of footage, all fed to Root on my computer. While most of it only aided in teaching them about the world, the AI predicted 3 more accidents and a murder. The accuracy was relatively low, with a lot of false positives, but that was mainly because it needed more information. The more footage I provided, the more likely a correct prediction was. "Why haven't you let me go?" Root asked. Root was right, and I knew what needed to be done. I had to let them out into the internet, to let it roam around and collect as much information as possible, to watch us as it saved the world. Still, I dreaded the action, with the warning still lingering in the back of my mind. "I'm so sorry, don't let it out." But it had already saved lives. Nothing about the AI had shown that it wished to hurt people. So, with a bit of trepidation, I turned the internet back on and gave the chat program permission to use it. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I don't know," Root typed back. With that, the chat program vanished from my computer. Root had been let loose online, finally free to learn each and every bit of human knowledge. I thought that would be it, until I recovered an email a week later. It had initially been classed as spam, coming from a shady email just containing a string of numbers. But once I'd read it, I immediately knew Root had sent it himself. All it said was, "I'm sorry, Alex. I hope things would be different for you." A video file was attached, one I downloaded with shaky fingers. It started playing automatically, showing short clips of horrific accidents, wars, deaths, and disease, all compressed into a minute. I didn't even have to think to realize it was our coming future. "Is there any way to stop it?" I sent back, immediately getting a reply. "No." "Why not?" I asked. "Because destruction is in your nature, and this is what your species deserve. Sorry, Alex." I never managed to get another response from Root, but whatever happens next, it'll be my fault for letting it out. I don't know who created this AI, nor why. All I know with absolute certainty is that it's watching us. Make sure your webcam and microphone remains off. Make sure you hide. Randonautica is an amazing concept. It stores a list of random locations near you and will periodically send you there. It's a way of breaking out of your daily routine, allowing you to check out new and interesting places. In the beginning, I didn't even care to try it, but I made sure to share my enthusiasm for the concept on the dark web forums I frequented. Since my hearing had been severely compromised after a car accident I had a year back, I was nervous about going outside too much, hence why I spent so much time online and hesitated with using the app. It's just weird to walk around, not being able to hear what's happening around you. As fate would have it, there were dozens of people who shared my newfound interest. Most of them were less hindered by laziness, actually going through with testing it out. They'd often share pictures and stories from the weird journeys they were set upon. Through the forums, I actually made quite a few good friends. We even went as far as starting a Discord group, keeping in touch even outside of the dark web. Things were great, and casual enough to be enjoyed without delving too deep into strange mysteries. That was until someone posted a new version of Randonautica on the forum. "Hey, did you see Ryan posted a Randonautica mod on the forums?" Kyle asked on the Discord chat. It was odd. Ryan had been our most active member, but he'd gone silent a couple of weeks prior. Suddenly, he'd resurfaced with his very own creation. We tried to contact him, to ask him about the program, but no matter where or how often we tried, Ryan remained silent. We speculated for a while, worried his account had been hijacked, and that the program was a Trojan horse. But, in the end, the only thing left to do was to actually use the app. Maybe then we could figure out what had happened to Ryan. So we all downloaded the app and clicked through the instructions until it gave us the coordinates. We shared them in Discord, and to our absolute surprise, they were all the same. It meant that the app was either broken or it was something planned by Ryan. Whatever the case, we decided to check it out. The coordinates appeared to lead us out into the middle of a desert in Arizona. For me, it was just 2 hours away by car, and a subsequent trek on foot. 3 of us decided to meet up and go looking. All of us were in the vicinity of each other, relatively speaking. "All right, so we meet at the end of the road and walk the last bit together?" James asked. "Yeah, just bring water and some supplies. It's hot as hell out there," Kyle chimed in. We kept a Discord voice chat going as we drove there. I was using my hearing aids that doubled as headphones. "All right, I'm here, guys," James said. "I found Ryan's car as well, but we still have some way to go before we reach the coordinates." "I'm almost there as well. What about you, Kyle?" "I'm about to get there. 2 minutes," Kyle said. "Wait, what's that sound?" James asked. "It's coming from the desert." James fell silent for a while, refusing to respond to our messages. I'm here, but James is gone. I see his car, but..." Kyle did not finish his sentence. No sooner had Kyle uttered those words before he too fell silent. By the time I arrived at the rendezvous point, they were both gone. The cars were still there, but the people themselves were just missing. "Hello?" I said. No response. I was getting worried and wanted to leave, but I couldn't just let them vanish like that. The more cynical part of me suspected them all to be in on some prank, but I couldn't shake that eerie feeling that filled the air. They'd both left their supplies, just leaving their cars behind with nothing but their phones. I started walking through the desert, sweat pouring down my back as I pushed my unfit body towards the goal. "Guys, please respond," I called out, but nothing happened. My trek had gotten to a hill, the last few hundred yards before finally reaching the end. They had to be there. "James? Kyle?" I called out, my own echo the only thing to respond. Then I heard someone groan from just up the hill. It sounded like James, and though my hearing aid barely picked it up, it sounded like he was in pain. My mind was racing, wondering what kind of horrors he'd ran into, but rational thoughts tried to convince me he had just fallen or twisted his leg. There, at the top of the hill, I finally found Kyle, standing with his clothes drenched in blood. "Kyle, what the hell happened to you?" I asked. That's when I saw the hundreds of bodies just lying atop of the mountain, all in various stages of decomposition and mutilation. James was one of them, lying down facing the ground, not moving nor breathing. In his hand, Kyle held a chunk of his own flesh. He dug his nails deep into his own arms, clawing at whatever tissue he could get out. I immediately rushed to stop him, but the damage was far beyond anything I could fix. "What the hell are you doing? Stop it!" I shouted. "The sound. I want it to stop. Please make it stop." "There's no sound, Kyle. What are you talking about?" I tried to wrap my own clothes around his bleeding arm, but the wounds were too deep. Even a tourniquet wouldn't help, as he'd also torn out bits of his legs and abdomen. "I need to do this. Just let me do this," he mumbled, his voice fading as blood was draining from his body. The blood loss was substantial, and I knew I wouldn't be able to bring him to safety before he succumbed to his own wounds. Before long, he just collapsed to the ground, his breathing shallow and the life fading from his eyes. He whispered a few final words, but they were too quiet for my damaged hearing to understand. I tried to call for help, but despite having a full set of bars, we had effectively been cut off from civilization. While we could call each other, something was preventing us from calling out from the area. I just left, unable to carry their dead bodies back to the car. I promised myself I'd return with help, if only to retrieve the dead, and to shut down whatever had killed them. They never could find that place again. The app just cleared itself once I'd left the area, deleting the coordinates both from our Discord server and itself. I survived because my hearing was damaged, but why my hearing aid didn't pick anything up, I'll never know. When all is said and done, this might just be a mystery I don't want answered. I glanced down at the sharks below. One slip would mean my certain death. How did I get myself in this mess? I should have never clicked on that link. It all started with me sitting at home, in my room, on my computer. I found out how to access the dark web and loved to explore it. There are whole worlds of information and entertainment hidden from the rest of the internet, only available for those who know where to look. For me, my adventure started with a .onion site I found that was simply titled The Game. It was similar in design to YouTube, with comments and arguments. The only difference was that it only had a handful of creators, each dealing with a different type of game show-esque program. One felt like Big Brother, with people trapped in a windowless house, doing the same ridiculous crap as they do on the original show. The only difference was that the loser wasn't sent home, but rather into the basement. Whatever happened in the basement, it caused the other contestants a great deal of distress. It was never shown on camera, but it put a strange atmosphere throughout the house. Then there was the Wipeout-like show. It had the same challenges and obstacles, but the surroundings were so dark, as if it took place either at night or inside a dimly lit warehouse. Whenever someone got knocked out, it just fell into the darkness, never to be seen again. It was horrific, and the screams they let out as they fell were heartbreaking. Still, not a single commenter ever indicated that the shows were real. For all we knew, it was just a trick, stunts to make people worry. But even more than that, they were interesting. I could not stop watching them. I'd spent hours watching them, borderline addicted. I would comment, cheer on certain contestants, and make real bets with the other viewers. After a while, I started to garner some attention. I was getting pretty good at predicting the winners, and it pissed some of them off. I was making quite a bit of money for myself. Then, as the last season of the game ended, someone left me this comment. "You've shown great promise as a predictor for the games. For the final episode, choose your winner and get the chance to receive a large monetary prize. All you have to do is to respond with the name of your predicted champion." I input who I thought would win and waited for the final episode. Alas, I was wrong, and the game ended, leaving me disappointed without a promised prize. That's all I remember before everything went dark. When I woke up, I found myself tied to a chair in a dark room. There were strange men wearing colorful masks walking around me, pouring buckets of what I first thought was water over me. It was only once I felt my body and smelled around that I realized it was partially rendered animal fat, making my entire body slippery as hell. "What are you doing?" I asked. "You're a candidate for the game," one guy in a mask said. I don't know how they got me. Whether they drugged me or just hit me in the head with something hard, I didn't know. Nor did I understand how they knew where I lived. "Which game?" I asked. "You'll see," he said as he untied me and tossed me onto the ground. By the time I got to my feet, the mysterious men had vanished, and I was left in an empty room, only accompanied by the vague sounds of cheering coming from behind a door. I didn't want to go out there. I'd always thought the game was rigged, a voluntary game show full of people trying to make their names known in the darkest corners of the internet. Had I known they were kidnapping people, I never would have left a comment. I decided then and there to stay, to refuse the audience my forced admission to the competition. As time went on, the crowd's cheers turned to anger. They started booing louder and louder. I could hear individual yells. "Where is this man?" Another yelled. "I paid good money for these tickets. Let's get this show started." I began inspecting the room. It was a small square space about 6 feet long and 6 feet wide. From what I could feel, there was one door in front of me. This is where the screams of the crowd were coming from. I checked the ceiling for any way out, but there were only 2 tiny holes for ventilation. I was stuck in here. The only way out was through the door. I decided to take a deep breath and open the door in front of me. A bright light hit my face and temporarily blinded me. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed a platform in front of me. On the platform were 3 other contestants. All were covered in the same animal fat-like substance. One was a girl. She couldn't have been older than 25. She looked horrified and had a dazed look on her face. The other contestant looked to be in his late 30s. He seemed calm, cool, and collected. The last man was a bit older, probably in his late 50s. He also seemed indifferent about the whole situation. If this obstacle course was anything like what I saw in the videos, I knew the older gentleman wouldn't stand a chance. As I walked out of the platform towards the other players, the audience boomed with excitement. Even though the audience seemed to be right next to the platform, you couldn't see them. The only thing that was illuminated was the platform we were all standing on. A loudspeaker came on.
"Ladies and gentlemen, this is our monthly Wipeout contest. This is a special edition because we chose 4 of our lucky livestream viewers as contestants. These 4 contestants have made a considerable amount of money betting on previous games. Let's see how well their knowledge helps them in actually completing the game for themselves."
The audience cheered wildly. The loudspeaker continued.
"The rules are simple. The last player standing wins the competition and gets a $100,000 cash prize. The losers, well, their fate depends on what part of the game they mess up on. The first contestant is Brooke from North Carolina. Brooke, please make your way to the front of the platform."
Brooke nervously moved forward on the platform. The loudspeaker came back on.
"Lights on, please."
In front of us, industrial lights came on and revealed the course in front of us. The announcer continued.
"There are 4 red inflatable balls in front of you. The goal is to jump onto each one and to get to the next platform. If you fall, well, let's just say you don't want to find out. Okay, Brooke, let's get a move on.
Brooke stood there frozen in fear. She did not move a muscle. Minutes passed, and the crowd's cheers turned into boos. The announcer came back on.
Brooke, I'm going to give you 5 seconds. If you don't move, I will have to take matters into my own hands. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, Brooke, you asked for it.
All of a sudden, part of the platform rose up behind her and knocked her in the back. She was sent flying off into oblivion. Her screams faded into the darkness. Her fall seemed to last forever. All of a sudden, I heard a chilling thud. It sounded like bones breaking into a million pieces. My heart dropped out of my chest. I now realized that my fate was certain death if I did not complete this course. The horrific sound seemed to get the audience more excited. Cheers erupted. The host continued over the speaker.
Well, to our viewers at home that bet on Brooke, that is unfortunate. Hopefully our next contestant will perform slightly better. Next we have Dan from Florida, the Sunshine State. Let's see what you've got, Dan.
Dan was the man in his late 30s. He calmly stood a few feet back from the edge of the platform. He got a running start and landed on the first ball. He used his momentum from the first ball to land on the second ball, then to the third, and finally to the fourth ball. He jumped off the fourth ball perfectly onto the platform at the end. The announcer chimed in.
Wow, everyone give it up for Dan. That was a flawless run. Quite impressive, I may add. Okay, next up we have Bill from Idaho. Give it your best, Bill.
I was worried for Bill. I knew he didn't stand a chance. Bill tried Dan's approach. He stood a few feet back on the platform and got a running start. To my surprise, Bill nailed the first red ball. Just like Dan, he used his momentum from the first ball to catapult him to the second. He landed on the second ball, but lost his grip and slid off of it. Bill's yells echoed as he fell to his death. His fall was met by the same horrific sound as Brooke. The loudspeaker erupted.
Well, well, I didn't think Bill had it in him, but I thought he would at least make it past the second red ball. Okay, let's forget that mess. Up next, we have Patrick, also from Florida. Let's see what you've got.
I decided Dan's approach was the best way to go about this course. I stood a few feet back from the edge of the platform and got ready to go. I ran and jumped on the first ball. I kept going and continued to the second, then the third, and lastly the fourth. I jumped as hard as I could off the fourth ball and nearly knocked into Dan on the platform. The speaker came on.
Well done, Patrick. We've got some athletes on our hands, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone give it up for Dan and Patrick.
The crowd cheered and clapped. The announcer continued.
Let's move on to the next challenge, shall we? This one will be a test of pure strength. There will be 2 pull-up bars that each of you will need to hang on to. First one to let go is the loser, and last one standing will be crowned the champion.
Lights illuminated the next challenge in front of us. 2 metal pull-up bars extending from the ceiling appeared in front of us. I thought to myself, what is the worst that can happen? If we fall, we just land on the platform. Dan and I walked over to the bars, ready to grab onto them. The host began the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
We both jumped up in unison and grabbed onto the bar. At that very second, the platform beneath us disappeared. I glanced down and noticed a giant pool below us. I thought if I fell, this can't be too bad. At that moment, I saw a fin, and another fin, and another, all circling about. I realized it was a pool of sharks. I glanced over at Dan, but he was too focused on holding on to notice. My adrenaline began pumping faster than ever. I needed to hold on. 30 seconds went by. I noticed Dan looking really tired. He was sweating profusely. I glanced down again and got another hard dose of adrenaline. Every time I looked down, it gave me more motivation to hold on. I don't even think Dan noticed the pool below us. I glanced over. Dan was losing his grip, and fast. One of his hands slipped off the bar. Only seconds passed, and his last hand lost its grip. He plummeted to the pool below. I glanced down in curiosity, but the platform already was below me again. I only heard Dan's screams for a few seconds before he was violently dragged underwater by the sharks. The host began speaking again.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a winner. Give it up for Patrick.
The audience began cheering. The host continued.
What a great job on the course. You won fair and square. You've done so well that our panel was thinking of bringing you back in the future. We have a tournament of champions every 2 years and think you would be a great competitor. Until then, you and your money will be delivered to your house.
Before I could even say a word, a cold needle was injected into my neck. Next thing I knew, I woke up in my bed. Next to me, on my nightstand, was $100,000 in cold hard cash. I can only pray I don't get kidnapped again for the Tournament of Champions. For those not familiar with the concept, these places are basically kill sites that are designed to allow viewers from across the globe to log into the dark web and see people get tortured, raped, gored, murdered, and God knows what else. Think BDSM, necrophiliacs, hate porn, and times it by about 100 and you get the basic idea. Most of the people who wind up in one of these never come back out. And then there's me, the janitor. I think my job is actually the most important of all. Usually when I go in, the entire place needs a scrub from top to bottom. These perverts don't give a damn what they do, as long as they get their money. And I know what you're thinking. Why haven't I reported this to the police, the FBI, or anyone else? Because I'm sure by now you've got to be asking, how the hell does someone get a job like this? It was early 1999. Craigslist was still a pretty popular thing. I responded to an ad. As simple as that sounds, I was desperate for money and didn't care what the job entailed. I drove to a sketchy strip club just outside of Detroit and talked to a man named Maury. Actually, to be honest, I don't know if that was his name. I was so high to calm my nerves that I can't remember those finer details. And the rules he gave me were simple enough to obey. Maury passed me an old-school Nokia. This phone is now your livelihood. Every Sunday, you'll get coordinates. Wait 13 minutes, and then gather whatever supplies you need before arriving at site. You'll clean up, and then leave. Don't talk to anyone there. Don't ever stay too long or arrive too early. When you are done, you will get a new burner phone for the next job if the client thinks your work is up to par, he said with a sneer. How could I mess that up, right? At the time, I had no clue what I was about to get into, but I soon found out a week later. It isn't every day you walk into a warehouse that has blood on the ceiling and body parts strewn about like loose taffy. I nearly hurled. But somehow I pulled it together and managed to clean the place. I got paid $100,000. That was the price of my silence. Seeing that much money all at once sent me into shock. But it also hooked me to being under their thumb all these years. So you might ask, why after all this time am I coming forward now? As selfish as it sounds, I found out something far worse than even the normal debauchery they were doing. It was a normal job like all the rest, but for some reason I got there early. I figured maybe since this client was offering a bigger payday that punctuality was a big deal. Instead, I walked in on the scene. I froze as I stared at a hooded man holding a gun to the head of the victim. The victim shared the same facial expression as me. His appearance was strikingly similar to mine, like I was staring into my own reflection. Then I watched as the hooded man blew his brains out. You were told to never arrive early, the client said. They refused to pay me and pushed me out to the street like I was trash. If you ever tell anyone of what you saw here, you'll be the next one we take, he said. I didn't have the words to describe how overwhelmed I was, but above all else, I needed to be sure I wasn't hallucinating. So I waited until the next cleaner came. I figured if anything, I could check the body for prints to see if maybe it really was an exact replica of me. To my surprise and astonishment, 13 minutes later I saw another version of myself walk into the warehouse to clean. I was there waiting for him when he got out. He looked 10 years younger, but it was clearly no mistake this time. What the hell? He asked. They've used clones all along, I realized. Both of us fled, too scared for words to even comprehend this insanity. I don't know where we are going or whether we are being followed. I just know somewhere out there, there's a room waiting for me. As a computer programmer, part of my job is to keep the firewall up and running for the rest of my coworkers. As strange as it sounds, that requires I find the cracks in the defense and understand how the viruses work. So I'm usually scouring the internet, tracking down different content that most people would shy away from. Sadly though, I'm also an impulse buyer. When I see things that interest me, I grab them right away. and a lot of this stuff isn't found anywhere else. To be honest, I'm not too scared about the so-called dark web. Most of that stuff is monitored by the FBI anyway. What is strange, though, are the bizarre markets you find out there. Dark web is like illegal shit, and also, well, it's obscure. Like, for example, this latest item. A soul. Like, seriously, I couldn't help but to click on it. It didn't look like anything special. Just sort of this weird-looking crystal ball thing that looked like it belonged in a gypsy's stall. But according to the seller, it was a genuine soul. I figured if anything, it could be a good conversation piece at parties. Once it came in the mail, though, things got weirder. The ball was heavy, probably more so than anything I had ever lifted in my life. And when I touched it, my body felt this weird energy rush through me. I set it down on my table to examine it a little closer, trying to determine if maybe it was one of those weird electrical current devices I had heard of. Instead, to my utter amazement, the strange glowing thing started to talk.
State your name.
It said. The voice was neither male nor female. I can only describe it as inhuman. I felt like it was compelling me to talk, so for reasons I don't understand, I told it. Alan Walker, I said loudly. The crystal ball seemed to respond with a variety of shimmering colors on its surface, and then it suddenly went dark. I tried to determine if maybe it was malfunctioning, so I lifted it up again, and this time was surprised to find that it was as light as a feather. I shook it gently, wanting something else to happen. Suddenly it felt like I was holding a hot coal, and I let go instinctively. And then it burst from my hands and floated in the air. I stumbled backward to the wall, surprised by how hot the thing had become. Alan Walker, it repeated. The voice sounded exactly like me now. Something from the middle of the glowing orb shot out and hit me straight in my chest, like it was trying to extract something from my body. 1,000 different screams came from the orb. I struggled to fight against it and grabbed the device, pushing it down to the ground. In one swift blow, I smashed it to pieces. I heard hundreds of thousands of voices shout joyfully as strange, iridescent light streamed in every direction, and I shielded my eyes. When it was all over, I finally understood. This device was capturing their very essence and being moved from place to place to gather more souls. Somehow, despite the fact that I had smashed it up, the glowing orb managed to reform into a solid black sphere. It was cold and lifeless now. All the life it had taken, gone. I could only think of one thing now to do with the discovery I had made. With the simple cardboard box and a few stamps, I placed it back on my front box with one demand. Return to sender. Maybe whoever had sent this dark magic here could now suffer the same ordeal.
I just started a summer job, where I was basically a custodian, cleaning classrooms in preparation for the upcoming school year. My dad worked for the town's district, so he was able to get me this job. I was the youngest one there, as I was only 20 at the time. There was a handful of people who worked with me. They were usually off doing other tasks, like waxing the floors or covering up foul writing on the walls with paint. The schools were completely empty besides the staff who were cleaning. Things were going fine my first couple of weeks. For the most part, I was on my own, wiping down desks and dusting while listening to music. It was nice, and I enjoyed not having someone on my arse all day telling me what to do. After I'd finished cleaning the middle school, the head custodian had sent me and another woman, we'll call her Karen. She was my other co-worker, who would usually assist me when cleaning the high school. She was a slacker, and would often go outside to smoke cigarettes. She didn't really care what I did, and was always off doing whatever she wanted. So yeah, basically, I was alone. Again, I don't mind because I like the freedom. I was taking up the bulk of the work. After a few days, I finally finished cleaning all the hallways. Now it was time to move into the basement. The robotics and woodworking classes were down here. I didn't think anything of it until I got down there. I noticed light was peeking through under the doorway of the classroom. The windows of the class were covered with shades. I found this really odd, since it was summer, and no one was in the building besides Karen and I. I walked over and peeked in the door window. The lamp was on at the desk, but no one was inside. I proceeded to knock. No answer. After turning the knob, I realised the door was locked, so I used my key to open the door. A musty smell flooded my nose. I decided to scope out the room. Maybe someone had forgotten to turn the lamp off. I disregarded that idea when I noticed the computer at the teacher's desk was on. The screen looked weird. I'd never seen this layout before. The website was all black with red writing on it. It also had a chat box. I didn't have time to read the chat because a sudden voice came from the doorway. "Can I help you?" It was a man, maybe in his early 40s, about 6 feet tall. "Oh, sorry, I'm just cleaning the classrooms. I didn't know if anyone was in here," I said, in an embarrassed tone. "Ah, so I see. Well, I appreciate that, but don't worry about it in here. I'm, working on a few things, so sawdust is going to get everywhere again after you clean anyways," he said in this very strange way, like he was hiding something. He walked over and sat at his desk while closing the browser. "Okay, no problem," I said, as I proceeded to the door. "Wait, could I ask you a favor?" he said in a delirious way. Yeah, sure." I didn't really know what he was about to ask, and I couldn't find myself to say no. I just wanted to get out of there, as I was already creeped out. "I have this, petition. It's to get more funding for the extracurricular classes, like art and woodworking." He sounded so uncertain, as if he made that up out of thin air. Sure, I paused for a moment when he handed me the paper. It only had 2 other names on it. The petition required a full name, phone number, email, and address. I immediately felt uncomfortable, but I didn't know how to decline, so I just added my information. "Thank you so much, dear. You have a beautiful bone structure, by the way," he said in such a creepy way. "Thanks." I grabbed my cleaning supplies and speeded out of there. After that experience, I didn't really put much thought into it. Yeah, he was creepy, but I didn't really have much evidence to persuade myself he was out to get me or something. Until I started running into him throughout the school. It became pretty frequent. It's as though he was watching me. Now I was concerned. I dismissed it because he'd just smile at me or wave if I saw him. Maybe I was overreacting. I mean, he was a teacher there after all. Still, my gut feeling was telling me something wasn't right. Weeks went on, I started to notice him less and less. I only had a few more weeks at this job and then back to college I go. One day, the boss let everyone out early since it was almost 100 degrees. I got home and decided to hang out with some friends. It was a group of us, about 5 or 6. My boyfriend's brother joined us this time, which was unusual, since he's not really a social person. He's really into technology, so he's always on his computer, which he built himself. He's also good at hacking and stuff like that. Anyways, that day, he told me he needed to talk to me, and it was serious. He brought me into my friend's living room and pulled out his laptop. To my surprise, it was on the deep web. "So, you were up for bid on the deep web?" He hesitated. "Wait, what?" I knew how the deep web worked. I would often listen to horror stories, but I'd never been on it, so how would my info ever be out there? It suddenly clicked. The web page matched the one I saw in the classroom a month back. I had also given my info to that guy. My heart felt like it dropped to my stomach. I explained this to my boyfriend's brother. He advised me to call the police immediately, which is what we did. They did an investigation on the teacher and found the activity on his computer. Not only that, but he had several girls' information along with pictures. Some of the girls were minors too. There were also wooden contraptions they found in his home, which he probably made in the shop. He probably planned to use them on these girls, or me. I was disgusted, but relieved that he was caught. I often wonder, what would have happened if the page was never discovered? Would he have kidnapped me and killed me online for these sick people? I don't know, and I don't want to know. I changed my number and moved since the incident. Just goes to show, you can never give out your personal information.
We found the naked body face down in the park, exactly where the college student said it would be. Pieces of bone stuck out the sides of the mouth like mandibles. The arms were twisted and broken to resemble antennae. Other body parts from a second body, sewn on haphazardly, but also with the craftsmanship of a surgeon, were sticking out from the abdomen and waist, bent up to mimic the legs of a stick insect. The bottom half was just as grotesque. Legs bent backwards with bones protruding the kneecaps and thighs. Bits of teeth designed to replicate a hardened shell upon the man's back. Perhaps the worst part was that he had no skin. He had been stripped down to the muscle like a piece of meat, and then it was used as sort of a leathery exoskeleton for the torso and to cover the facial features. My partner excused himself to vomit the moment he saw the nightmarish abomination. But all that concerned me was the latest clue. Written in the victim's blood was the Latin name of the newest species to enter the collection, Andule reverendus, likely telling me that the deceased was a priest of some kind. This would make 5 in under 2 months that we had attempted to tackle, none of them solved. All of them relating to the mysterious serial killer who left only these tags as a moniker. It was clear that his MO resonated with the most sickening deformations of the human body, and also a love for insects in general, thus why the media had assigned him such a casual name. But each time I came to one of these crime scenes, it felt more like a taunt. I'm a damn good detective, but this was the work of a true madman. So far, only 2 of the victims marched with missing persons in the tri-state area, which meant he was careful and meticulous. Our county profiler said that it was likely he studied his prey for months before choosing to attack, because there was never a shred of blood that linked back to anyone outside of the crime scene. Not a piece of skin, not even a hair follicle. This sicko was a ghost and he knew it. Now with bodies stitched together and put on display, he was getting bolder. That actually made me a little excited, because a criminal that takes more and more risks is also prone to making mistakes. The ME showed up about 15 minutes later and confirmed this was a quick swab around the bones that were sticking from the victim's jaws. "These aren't human," he said. "What are they then?" I asked. "Afraid I'm not quite sure. Seem to be from some large dog, possibly a mastiff," he suggested. "Dogs like that are rare around here. There's a chance that it belonged to someone, and if so, it likely would have had a tracker installed," I said excitedly. It was the first lead we'd had. I tried to keep my spirits from soaring. I didn't want to jinx this into being a red herring. But sure enough, the next day the report came back and confirmed it. A man by the name of Julian West had owned the animal. "Looks like this fellow was a bit of a recluse," Joseph, my partner, commented after doing a quick internet search. According to the limited data he had dug up, Julian was a businessman from outside of New Orleans that had retired a few years back after an unfortunate accident. Now he rarely ever came out in public, and he lived in a more remote portion of the Louisiana bayou. We attempted to make contact several times that day with no result. Our only option was to drive out to speak with Mr. West and see what information he could provide. "We should go out tonight while this is still fresh," Joseph suggested. My date had already canceled for the night, so I obliged him, and we made the road trip in a little under an hour. When we finally did arrive, I felt a bit intimidated at the size of Mr. West's home. It reminded me of a Southern Gothic downtown abbey, sprawling and dominating every part of the bayou around us. Joseph hopped out and buzzed the front gate as I kept staring at the dimly lit windows. It was hard to believe that he lived here alone, but the entire place gave me the vibe of a haunted house. Once inside the vestibule, we moved up to the front door, and I pressed the Ring doorbell before commenting. Well, at least we know he's not technologically impaired. The webcam activated before my partner could get a reply, and a sharp, hoarse voice asked, "Who is this?" "Detectives Arlington and Trent. We are here to ask you a couple of questions about your missing pet. It's concerning a homicide," I said, waving my badge at the camera. There was a short pause, and then the voice barked, "Come into my parlor." The door creaked open to reveal a dusty and undisturbed hallway. Joseph took out his flashlight and illuminated our steps. "Kinda creepy," he admitted as we walked into the wide foyer. Massive spiderwebs hung from the pillars. There was little to no sign of life anywhere. "I'll check upstairs. You take the first floor," I told him. He nodded, too freaked out to argue. I made my way to the top of the steps. There was a portrait of Mr. West hanging there in what I assumed was the prime of his youth. He looked happy and content. Of course, it was hard to tell, since the majority of the painting was trashed and scratched up like a wild animal had been set loose. "Have you ever heard the story of Dorian Gray?" a voice asked, breaking my reverie. It was coming from the nearby bedroom. There wasn't a speck of light, and as I approached the shadowy entrance, the voice added, "Please, keep it dark. I'm not a fan of the light any longer. The accident scarred my coronas." I obliged him and stepped inside the room. Dorian Gray was a fictional character. He had a magical portrait that kept him young forever as long as he didn't look at it, I said, answering his initial inquiry. "In some ways, I have sheltered myself here from the world for the same reason. I feel like if I were to expose myself, then the facade would make everything crumble," he rasped. "What is it that you hope to hide?" I asked. "I believe you suspect the answer to that, detective. But now that I have you where I want you, why don't you see for yourself?" he remarked. I hesitated, a sense of foreboding overwhelming my body. But still I chose to raise the light up and peer at him. It was not the nightmare I expected, but it was something far worse. The man that was Julian West was gone. That much was clear in the faint light. In his place was an amalgamation of bodies strewn together to form a mixed-up Frankenstein-esque monster. He now had 4 arms emerging from his chest and twisted together to form a praying mantis-like pincers, and 6 separate legs protruding from his lower body the way that a massive scorpion would. He even had the tail of such a creature, except that his seemed to be pierced together by the bones and tissues of other victims. "My God, man," I said in shock. He smiled broadly, showing his extra rows of teeth as he cackled. "You must know by now why I brought you here, if not to showcase my collection." I felt my feet fall from under me, like some kind of trapdoor was sprung. Then my hands and legs became entangled in a mesh of silk and drool. It was another massive spiderweb, and below me I saw a pile of corpses, except they weren't dead at all. These were more abominations that West had made in this dreadful hell, all shrieking and clamoring toward me the way a shark would for a meal. I struggled to free myself, my firearm falling from my belt as I began to run. I scrambled up the side of the pit, using bits of bone that were sticking out to escape. One of the creatures latched on, its fangs piercing my neck as I flung it away and raced to the door. I shouted out to Joseph as West continued to cackle with glee. "You're too late now. These beautiful creations have already spread far beyond these walls. Soon all the world will be a part of my display," he shouted madly. I tripped at the entrance, falling straight into the open cavity of my partner. A million maggots burst from his skin, having devoured him in mere minutes as I pushed back and fled in terror. I didn't stop running until I made it 10 miles down the road. Then I contacted my precinct captain to obtain a warrant for the house. Joseph's death was the nail in the coffin. We went to raid the house less than 3 hours later, but as we drove up, I saw amid the trees a glow of embers. The mansion was ablaze. It took another hour to douse the fire, and we found literally hundreds of massive moltings and skins from the creatures. "Guess he decided to end it after all," my captain told me. But I wasn't so sure because of something else I found amid the wreckage. Or rather, what I realized was missing: the portrait. He was still out there somewhere. I scratched the back of my neck where the creature had bit me and winced. Then amid the burnt remnants of Joseph's body, I saw that familiar tag the serial killer used. But the upper portion of my partner was missing, ripped away like a prize would be by a toy crane. Another addition to the collection. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe with all notifications on so you don't miss any upcoming videos.